and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. A Saudi oil attack over the weekend. Who was responsible? We'll have the latest there. Plus, new trouble for Justice Kavanaugh. Now, top Democrats calling for his impeachment. Plus, auto workers at General Motors are on strike. But first, here are your headlines.
Sources tell ABC News the woman accusing NFL star Antonio Brown of sexual assault will meet with NFL investigators today.
As the NFL conducts its own investigation, Brown wasn't placed on the commissioner's exempt list, the equivalent of paid leave, because there's no criminal investigation into the allegations. Brown's only consequence to this point, helmet maker Zenith dropping their sponsorship of him.
In the NFL, a fire broke out on the sidelines before Sunday's Colts-Titans game in Tennessee. Some equipment used in the pregame introductions burst into flames a few minutes before kickoff. The Titans say a pyrotechnic device malfunctioned. No one was hurt.
This morning, we remember lead singer Rick Ocasek. Sources say he apparently died of natural causes in his New York City apartment. He was 75. He and his wife of 28 years, actress Polina Borisakova, split up last year. She found him in his townhouse.
He was the nicest man. He was so gentle. I feel sad because I really like the band. I really like that genre of music.
The Cars had one hit after another in the late 70s and early 80s. Ocasek wrote most of their songs. The band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year.
We begin in the Middle East, where over the weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Iran launched nearly a dozen cruise missiles and over 20 drones in an attack on a key Saudi oil facility. With tensions already high, Trump warned the U.S. was locked and loaded. I want to bring in Louis Martinez at the Pentagon. Louis, good to see you. How do we know who's responsible for this?
Well, Kimberly, two things that are going on. One is that U.S. officials are telling us that, yes, Iran was responsible for this attack, that it's not the Houthi rebels in Yemen who are claiming responsibility for this attack that was behind it. They're saying that these missiles could have only come from one direction, which was from the north, which would have been from Iran. We also have Saudi military spokesman telling reporters in Riyadh just moments ago that, yes, it was Iran that was responsible for this. They're not saying that it was the Yemenis because they say that they've looked at some of the remnants of some of these devices that were left behind that may not have exploded, or the remnants that did after explosions, and they are Iranian-made, and that the Houthis in Yemen could not have been responsible. So what we saw on Sunday was the administration releasing the satellite imagery that showed the precision with which some of these strikes occurred at these very large oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, and they're pointing the fingers all the way at Iran on this one.
So I just want to talk about the rhetoric that President Trump used. He said locked and loaded. What did those words actually mean? Because this could be confusing, since that kind of implies war.
No, you're exactly right. It's kind of reminiscent of the language that the president used back in May when the Iranians were blamed for shooting down an American-made drone over the Persian Gulf. And yes, that language kind of implies, yes, some bellicosity behind it, right? But I think what is going on is, what we do know is that the president is meeting with his national security team, what they call a principals meeting at the White House, and he's being presented a range of options. It could be military options. It could be from the Treasury Department, and maybe more sanctions. It could be from the State Department, maybe seeking a more diplomatic course of action to increase the maximum pressure campaign against Iran if they are to blame for this. But that locked and loaded language, I think, implies that it's anything within that range of options that the United States could respond to. But ultimately, it's going to be about what the U.S. feels that the Saudis, because this was an attack against Saudi Arabia, so how are they going to respond? And then how is the U.S. going to assist them in potentially any response they choose?
So with this attack, this rocked the global energy prices. So what do we know about that?
It's definitely rocked the crude oil prices. We're talking millions of barrels of oil that come out of Saudi Arabia each day, and this is equivalent to about 5% of the world's oil supply. For the United States, in recent years, over the last decades, it's ramped up its oil supply domestically, and so we are no longer as dependent as we used to be on oil from the Middle East, particularly from Saudi Arabia. But any time that you have a situation like this that's going to destabilize the oil markets, it could potentially destabilize other markets as well. well. And so everybody is watching this closely because, as we know, anything that impacts oil is going to lead to domestic pressures. We saw over the weekend that President Trump indicated that he would be willing to authorize the release of any oil from what's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is oil that's been set aside within the United States in case oil prices need to go up way too high so that they can maintain the oil flow and ultimately gas for our cars here at stateside.
All right, Louis Martinez right there at the Pentagon. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to go ahead and bring in Karen Travers at the White House. Karen, good to see you. I just want to ask you about the president's tweets about this attack and now about these oil prices.
Yeah, the president, Kimberly, today seems to be trying to ease concerns among consumers and among the markets about what a spike in oil prices might mean for producers and buyers here in the United States. The president was tweeting, we don't need Middle Eastern oil and gas. As Louis said, the reliance has shifted. The president said, in fact, we have very few tankers there, but we will help our allies. Last night, the president tweeted just 3 words in one tweet: plenty of oil. That, of course, sent off the peanut gallery on social media reacting to it. But what the president was trying to say is that people should not be concerned that with this facility out of commission, potentially for several months as they do repairs, that this would have a big hit here. The president, as Louis said, did say he authorized the ability to tap into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is something that has not been done since 2011, but it is there for just these types of situations, emergencies, or when there are any concerns about a breakup or issues with global supplies.
Yeah, Karen, the back and forth in this relationship between the U.S. and Iran is interesting because there was a potential meeting for Trump and President Rouhani later this month.
There was buzz about this after the G7 summit in France, where the French President Emmanuel Macron was trying to act as a go-between to get the United States and Iran to a negotiating table. And the dates that were circled on everyone's calendars were next week at the United Nations General Assembly. Both the president and President Rouhani will be in New York City for those meetings. And there was a lot of speculation and rumblings that there could be a side meeting. This was never confirmed. It was not on the president's official schedule yet. They haven't announced the full slate of meetings he'll have with world leaders next week, but certainly it seems it would be very surprising and difficult to see them going forward with this at this point, with tensions increasing over this weekend's attack.
All right, Karen Travers right there at the White House. Thank you for the updates. We appreciate that. And guys, we're going to turn to the Supreme Court, where top Democrats and presidential candidates are calling for the impeachment of Justice Brett Kavanaugh amid new disturbing sexual misconduct allegations reported by the New York Times in an essay over the weekend. You remember his confirmation hearing and subsequent appointment was highly controversial, given it was centered around allegations from Dr. Christina Blasey Ford last fall. So I want to bring in Devin Dwyer in our D.C. bureau to explain this. Devin, good to see you. I just want you to explain what these new allegations are.
Yeah. Hey, Kimberly, good to see you. There is a new book out from 2 New York Times authors. You just saw the cover there. And in the book, which covers the scope of the Kavanaugh confirmation battle last year, there is a new previously unreported story involving Brett Kavanaugh, similar to the allegations of, you'll remember, his Yale classmate Deborah Ramirez. According to a witness that these Times reporters interviewed, Kavanaugh pulled his pants down at a drunken party and accosted another woman. The woman declined to be interviewed by the reporters. Her friends say she doesn't recall the story. ABC News reached her at her home in Boston overnight. She didn't want to talk about it, telling us to talk with Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh, when we reached out, also declined to comment on this. He's denied these allegations in the past. So the bottom line here is there's another allegation, an unsubstantiated allegation, familiar to that pattern of disturbing behavior towards women that came out in his confirmation hearing last year. And now there are new questions about whether members of Congress, whether the public actually got the full picture about the scope of his behavior as a college student. And so hence, as you mentioned, Kimberly, the Democrats now want to reopen that investigation into Kavanaugh.
Yeah, and that full scope that you're talking about is interesting because it says this New York Times essay says that over 25 people were offered up to the FBI who had corroborating evidence, and the Bureau did not investigate in this case with Deborah Ramirez.
Yeah, you'll remember back during the confirmation hearings, there was so much contention over whether or not the FBI should get back involved in his background investigation. They ultimately did, but many people will remember that the White House put them on a very short leash. So FBI background investigators were only allowed to gather evidence related to Dr. Ford, to Deborah Ramirez. They interviewed a very select number of witnesses. And so in this new New York Times book, the attorneys representing those women talk about how as many as 25, as you said, other corroborating witnesses to this behavior did come forward, but they were never approached by the FBI simply because those restrictions were put on that investigation.
And Devin, what happens to a Supreme Court justice if these allegations are true? Like, what goes on from here?
Well, these are allegations, but there's actually no sign, Kimberly, that they're going to reopen an investigation into any of this at this point. We should say the FBI background investigation was complete. The Senate voted and confirmed Justice Kavanaugh. There's some chatter up on Capitol Hill among Democrats that they could open an investigation into his behavior in the Senate, in the House Judiciary Committee. All of this is very unlikely at this point. Justices, as you know, are appointed for life. They can be impeached, much in the same way that a president can be impeached. But at this point, because so much of this was already litigated, because Republicans control the Senate, and because Democrats have some bigger fish to fry, they're looking still at whether they should be impeaching President Trump. It does seem unlikely that this will be reopened at this stage, but it's still very early.
Yeah, and just before we go, the president was also tweeting about Kavanaugh today, yes.
Yeah, he's tweeting a defense of his second nomination to the Supreme Court. The president tweeting that Justice Kavanaugh should sue the New York Times for libel. He does raise an interesting point, Kimberly. The New York Times, in the story that they published on Sunday in the newspaper, did leave out a key detail about this new allegation, that detail being that the woman has told her friends that she doesn't remember this situation and she declined to be interviewed. That was left out. The Times has since corrected the story. All of this, of course, feeding into the one-year anniversary of Kavanaugh's confirmation to the court. That's early next month. So both sides in his fight back at it, reigniting, relitigating this as part of the 2020 campaign.
So much going on. All right, Devin.
A lot of politics on this Monday.
Yes, absolutely. Devin Dwyer breaking it down in our D.C. bureau. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Guys, and now we turn to Detroit for a major walkout. More than 49,000 members of the United Auto Workers left General Motors factories to strike after contract talks broke down. So I want to bring in Alex Perez, who's right there in Detroit. Alex, good to see you. This walkout shut down plants across the country, right?
Yeah, Kimberly, good to see you as well. That's right. This is a big strike. There hasn't been a nationwide strike like this one since 2007. 55 plants across the country. I want you to take a look behind me here. You can see these workers at the picket line. This picket line has been like this active since about midnight. That was a deadline that the union gave General Motors to come up with some sort of deal. That deadline came and passed, and those workers have been at the picket line since then. Now, I want to bring in one of the people here at the picket line. Ashley Scales, you're a mother of three. You tell me you've worked at several GM plants, a few of them at least. Talk about why it's important to be out here today. The union seems to have a lot of support from its workers.
It's important to be out here because we're fighting for every American worker. We're fighting for, if you think about it, we're talking about medical, right? That's the #1 reason why people fall into bankruptcy. We're talking about job security. People don't have temporary bills. They don't have part-time bills. We have real bills. And these corporations are making more money than they've ever made. And yet we're supposed to take concessions continually. Where is the dignity and respect for the worker?
And that's one of the sticking points that I think a lot of the workers, according to the union, are going after here, that the profits have been increasing, but you guys, the workers, are not seeing them?
Yes, absolutely. During bankruptcy, we made sure that this corporation stayed afloat, not only by taking concessions contractually, but we also pay taxes. Our taxes actually help save this corporation. So we want GM to invest in America. We want them to stop taking our plants and putting them in Mexico and forcing our families to move all over. At least I'm blessed to stay in Michigan, but there are people moving to Arlington. There are people going to Tennessee. They're sending people everywhere. And how fair is that to a family?
Now, GM says part of their deal, they're willing to invest $7 billion, create 5,400 new jobs, save 2 plants that they had planned on closing. But you guys, the workers in the union, say that's not quite enough?
It's not enough. What they need to actually do is insource a lot of the work that has gone outside of here, that is going to Mexico, that's going to Taiwan, and all these other countries that they're literally making billions of dollars in profits in. We needed to come back to America. General Motors used to employ so many more Americans, and it was great for America. Now they're literally employing everyone else, and they're hurting the ones that they have left.
Is it a difficult decision for you, a mom of 3, for a lot of these people to support the union and say, hey, we're going to go on strike?
It's not difficult to support the union, but it is a difficult sacrifice because it's a sacrifice where we're not getting a paycheck. And imagine going from having literally money coming in to not having anything coming in. But you're sacrificing knowing that the outcome will hopefully be better. And I hope that every American, every worker stands with us.
And I mean, just for people who don't get it, so you're on strike. If this goes on very long, your pay is pretty much reduced to $250 a week?
It's $250 a week, and it's after the 8th day. So there's a lot of technicalities in there, but understand that pretty much it's like nothing. But I will say they do maintain our health care, and I'm very proud of the UAW for having that foresight.
In the 90s, we had a strike that went on 50-plus days. Are you worried we're going to have a similar situation? Or you think this might be like 2007, where it was 2 days?
I am worried, to be honest with you, because they're so far apart. So if they were closer in terms of what the demands were on both sides, and I wouldn't be as worried, but I am worried. I'm a mother of 3, and the bills keep coming. And so I really am worried, and I hope that it doesn't last that long, but we're going to stand for as long as we need to. Because if we don't stand now, we'll never win again.
GM made that unusual decision to release their offer, their deal, what they're offering you guys. The union traditionally just doesn't get into specifics about what they're demanding. Excuse us, as you can see, there's a bunch of cars driving by, honking, supporting the people picketing out here. But the union doesn't really release any of those details. The fact that GM released those details of their offer, happy, mad about that? How do you feel about that?
So the union actually, we have a democratic process. And so we actually, as the membership that you see out here, we submit the demands, and that's what they go to the negotiating table with. So we already know what the demands are in terms of the union side. I think it was manipulation on the corporation side, because really, you should just come with your best offer from jump. They've been negotiating for a couple months now. If you were really working on behalf of the worker, if you respected us, had dignity for us, you would have started from jump with the best offer, not 2 hours before you feel like we're going to walk out.
Yeah. Okay, Ashley, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. I know you're going to join the picket line here, as you have been for the last few hours with all of these people. Kimberly, that's the scene here in Detroit right now. Like I said, this picket line has been staffed since 11:59 last night, and the plan right now is to keep people here with these signs picketing until there's some decisions made, until a deal is reached. Kimberly?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for letting us hear from Ashley, because that really helps to understand what's happening. So the idea is that there is no idea of how long this will last.
Yeah, that's really the predicament that they are in right now. We spoke with one of the vice presidents from the union earlier today. He says he would not describe this as a complete standstill. He says both sides are at the table, both sides are talking and negotiating. They just have not been able to reach an agreement just yet. Kimberly?
All right, Alex Perez in Detroit, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Good to see you. And guys, we move to the NFL, where New England Patriots Antonio Brown played in the game against Miami this Sunday as an investigation begins, where a woman, his former trainer, Brittany Taylor, has accused him of rape and sexual assault. So today, Brittany is scheduled to meet with NFL reps, and I want to bring in Mike Tannenbaum in Bristol, Connecticut to discuss all of this. You know, Mike, Antonio did well in this game, but the league decided that they wouldn't put him on pay leave as this was going on. So why do you think they made that decision?
Well, the league will treat each situation on a case-by-case basis. In the past, there have been players like Kareem Hunt, Josh Brown, kicker of the New York Giants, that were paid on the exempt commissioners list. They were paid and placed on that list without criminal charges. I think the league is waiting because they haven't interviewed the person who's filing these charges. I think that interview may happen as early as today. And the league will probably reevaluate the situation once they collect more information. And we may know something as early as tomorrow, or certainly by the middle of the week.
Will be the nature of these talks, because they're going to sit down and they're going to discuss all of this with Brittany. How did these talks go?
Sure, they're going to be very thorough. They're going to want to make sure they get all the facts from her. They'll look at any evidence that she presents or her attorneys present. They'll try to talk to as many people as she presents as potential witnesses. The league is very thorough in these situations. They take these allegations very seriously. But again, right now it is a civil matter, and I think that's been a factor in why the league hasn't acted in terms of making Antonio Brown not eligible to play. However, that could change quickly, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, so I don't know if the league feels more pressure, because they have received a lot of scrutiny already for how they handle accusations of violence against women.
Yeah, I think it's a very fine line for the league, because it's, again, a very serious allegation. However, it's civil, and because of that, Antonio Brown is also due process. The union is going to watch very carefully how the league handles this. And again, there's a little bit of a fine line in terms of it's a civil case as of now. I think another factor that we should keep an eye on, this alleged conduct happened in Pittsburgh. Will the Pittsburgh DA get involved? That will be another factor that the league will weigh as well as they go ahead and assess what they should do with Antonio Brown.
Just for clarity, just so people know, you're saying civil case. How does that compare to a criminal case?
Well, we've seen the league act much quicker when there are formal criminal charges that have been imposed over the years to various players. And typically, if and when criminal charges have been filed by various district attorneys, the league has quickly placed players on exempt commissioners list. However, when it's a civil case, typically, they proceed as they are with Antonio Brown. They will talk to the witnesses, collect more information before moving forward. Again, these are very serious allegations, but as of this point on Monday, they are just allegations in a civil matter.
All right, Mike Tannenbaum right there in Bristol, Connecticut. Thank you for explaining. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. And guys, now we move to a topic that, quite frankly, is not discussed enough. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It affects all people, all backgrounds, all genders. But there's research that transgender people, and specifically transgender people of color, are at a much higher risk for domestic violence and murder. According to the Human Rights Campaign, at least 16 transgender people have been murdered this year, including most recently 22-year-old Tracy Williams from Houston. And these are just the ones that are reported. About half of these cases are from intimate partner violence. So I want to bring in Diamond Styles, a proud Black trans woman and co-host of the podcast, Marsha's Plate podcast. Very good to see you, Diamond. Thanks for being with us. You know, I just want to hear from you. What do you think accounts for this rise in murders in Black trans women of color? The discrimination of both race and sex. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that it's a combination of things. Of course, the uptick is due to the rhetoric that's going on politically. I think, and in culture, when you have people like Donald Trump rolling back transgender protections, and you have people like Dave Chappelle who are making jokes and doing stand-up comedy based on marginalized people, using us as the premise. When you have culture that pushes people who are already on the fringes, it just makes life even worse for them. So I think people are not being responsible with their platforms. I think that they are not taking the direness and seriousness of our life or death situations into account when they make this kind of rhetoric and put it out into the world.
Yeah, one thing, I was listening to a clip on your website, and you were saying that trans visibility is great, but that's not impacting your survival. Issues like housing issues and income inequality issues and healthcare issues. So I just want you to explain how it's more than just being visible on a television screen.
Exactly. I remember when I started my podcast, the reason why I started is because during the 2016 election, every time that people were putting a mic in front of a trans person, they were either white or somebody that was of privilege. It wasn't somebody who actually is on the ground dealing with these issues directly, who are acutely affected by any kind of shift and change in culture. So for me, I love shows like Pose. I love shows and visibility like Orange is the New Black. But visibility only gets you so far. We have to have mechanisms in our life to survive. We have to have healthcare. We have to have housing. We have to have clean water and food. We have to have these healthy relationship, access to therapy, access to so many things that if we don't have jobs, if we don't have insurance, we can't get access to these things, and it puts us out on the street, puts us into sex work, puts us into the arms of people who can be dangerous. It's just a concoction that can lead just to horrible situations.
Yeah, so before we go, what do you want people to know, and even to the people who are actual allies of the transgender community? What do you want people to know about what you guys face?
Just don't sit back. Go out and learn. You can listen to our podcast. You can engage with trans people online. Listen to them, trust them, believe what they say, and actually allyship is like a reoccurring thing. You got to constantly be in action in regards to helping this particular group of people. You have to be out in the field. You have to be out doing the work with them and able to dismantle these systems that they're coming up against.
All right, Diamond Styles, really appreciate you being with us today. And like you said, education is necessary first and foremost, so everyone can listen to Marsha's Plate podcast. And guys, before we go, a little bit of happy news from no one else than Beyonce. Have you seen The Lion King? If you have, good. Okay, have you listened to the album The Gift, which she calls her love letter to Africa? I sure hope so, because there's so many great tracks. My personal favorite is Brown Skin Girl, and she collaborated with so many African artists. And tonight, we all get to see the making of this iconic album because it is going to be on ABC as a TV special, and it's going to be absolutely incredible. So guys, you can check that out. It airs tonight. ABC, again, The Making of the Gift at 10 p.m. Eastern. And you guys continue to take care of yourselves, and if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these important headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.